Hey everyone, welcome back to Revise and Resubmit. You know what it is? It's your weekend book review. And this week we are taking a deep dive into the Routledge companion to Improvisations in Organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know
that's a juicy one.
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
It sounds like a dense one.
Mm-hmm. It's a big book.
It was a big book. But you know what? It's packed with really fascinating insights into how teams and companies navigate the unexpected. And I think that's something that we could all relate to, right?
Absolutely, yeah. In today's world, things change so quickly, and you got to be ready to adapt.
Exactly. So to help us unpack all of this, we've got our expert here. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here to guide us through this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Now, before we jump into the content, let's talk briefly about the editors. We've got Miguel Pina y Cunha, focuses on organizational learning and improvisation. Seems like a perfect fit for this book.
Absolutely, a perfect fit. And we've got Vera, who researches strategic decision-making, improvisation, leadership. And we've got Antonio Cunha Meneses Abrantes, who studies team dynamics and improvisation. And then we've got Anne Miner, who researches improvisation and its link to innovation and organizational change.
They really covered all the bases.
Really an all-star lineup.
Yeah, and I love in their introduction, they make this really interesting point. Organizational improvisation isn't about ditching planning altogether.
Right.
It's about saying, okay, we've got this plan, but how do we adapt when things inevitably go off script? Which, let's be honest, happens all the time.
Yeah, it always happens.
So the book is broken down into 4 parts.
Okay.
Part 1 sets the stage, explores what organizational improvisation is, or OI, as I'm sure I'll be saying a lot.
Yeah.
Why it matters and how it works. So they start off strong. Chapter 1 with a very simple but profound question. Why study organizational improvisation?
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Right. Like, why is this important? Is this just some new buzzword?
Right.
And they actually address that head on. They say, no, this has been happening for centuries. This is not a new fad.
Right.
It's across all kinds of industries and cultures. And they give the example of Jugaad.
Oh, yeah, the Indian concept.
Exactly. That Indian way of problem solving.
Resourcefulness, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Finding a way.
Making do with what you have.
I love that. And they say, recognizing that this has been around for so long can help us to better understand organizations.
Totally, yeah. It's like seeing something familiar with fresh eyes.
Okay, love that.
Yeah.
So we jump into chapter 2, and this is where things get really interesting for me.
Okay.
Because they talk about this paradox at the heart of OI.
Okay.
And they say, have you ever felt pulled between sticking to the plan and adapting on the fly?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about a constant tension.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're saying that is what OI is all about. Is finding that sweet spot where you're not abandoning planning, but you're also not being so rigid that you can't be flexible when you need to.
It's like that balance between structure and flexibility, right?
Yeah.
You need both.
And then they bring in this concept in chapter 3, which I love, of bricolage.
Bricolage. Now, for someone who may not know,
Yes, please explain.
what is bricolage?
What is that word?
Yeah.
Because I had to look it up.
It's a French word, and it essentially means...
It sounds fancy.
It does sound fancy. It essentially means making do with what you have. So think about it like you're trying to fix something and you don't have the right tools. So you use like a chewing gum wrapper and a paper clip.
You MacGyver it.
You MacGyver it, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's bricolage.
I love it.
Yeah.
So we're talking about being adaptable.
Yes.
But also resourceful.
Resourceful, absolutely.
So they're setting us up nicely for
yeah, they are.
really understanding what OI is all about.
Yes.
What OI is all about.
Yeah.
And then part 2 shifts gears a little bit, and they start exploring the when and the where of OI.
Okay, so the context.
Yes.
Yeah.
What triggers it, and what are the situations where it thrives.
Yeah.
So chapter 4 focuses on this concept of extemporaneity.
Extemporaneity,
Yeah, that's a good one.
which sounds very intimidating.
'Cause-
But they break it down.
But-
And essentially what they're saying is it's not just about speed, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, improvisation, that's just thinking on your feet really fast.
Yeah, quick, gotta go.
But they're saying it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
It's really about how planning and execution can actually happen simultaneously.
At the same time.
Yes.
Interesting.
And they give the example of a jazz musician, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Who's riffing on a theme. There's still a structure there.
Right.
but the beauty, the magic is happening.
It's in the moment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In those spontaneous flourishes.
So what are some of the things in an organization that would trigger this kind of improvisation?
Right, because you have to ask yourself, what gets this going?
Yeah.
What starts the engine?
What gets the ball rolling?
Yeah.
So chapter 5 digs into that.
Okay.
And they say it could be an unexpected problem,
Okay, yeah.
like a sudden supply chain disruption,
Oh, yeah.
or it could be a new opportunity that appears out of nowhere.
Right, like a new market opens up suddenly and you've got to jump on that.
Yes.
Right.
A pivot.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's about being able to seize the moment, whether it's reacting to a crisis
Right.
or capitalizing on something positive.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then it gets even more interesting in chapter 6
Okay.
because they bring in this concept of serendipity.
Serendipity with improvisation.
Yes.
How does that work?
So they're saying that, sometimes these moments of improvisation can actually lead to those unexpected breakthroughs, right?
Okay, yeah, so you're stumbling into something great
Yeah.
just by chance.
And it goes back to that concept we talked about of negative capability.
Right. That comfort.
Being okay with not knowing all the answers.
The unknown, yeah.
And this chapter really argues that embracing uncertainty, being open to the unknown, can lead to these serendipitous discoveries
Yeah.
that you never could have planned for.
Right.
Like the invention of the Post-it note, right?
Oh, yeah, the classic example.
It started as a failed adhesive.
Right.
And somebody saw the potential for something completely different.
A happy accident.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about what triggers a why.
Yeah.
We've talked about how it's connected to serendipity.
Yeah.
But what about the people involved,
The
right?
human element.
Yes.
Yeah.
So part 3 of the book zooms in on that,
Okay.
the human element of OI.
Okay.
And chapter 7 specifically looks at the character traits
Okay, interesting.
of people who are good at improvising.
So is there a certain type of person who's better at it?
That's what I was wondering.
Okay. Well, it's not like there's one specific personality type that has the market cornered on improvisation.
Okay. Because I was picturing
Yeah.
someone who's like
Like super extroverted, like
super extroverted, really quick on their feet, always has the answer.
yeah, life of the party.
Yeah.
Always ready with a joke.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily the case.
Well, so they outline 11 character dimensions
Okay.
that contribute to successful OI.
Okay.
And it's a mix of, they've got things like courage and temperance,
Go.
collaboration, practical wisdom.
So it's like a balance of being bold,
Yeah.
but also being thoughtful,
Yes, absolutely.
taking risks,
Taking risks, but not being reckless.
but not being reckless. Yeah.
Right. And it's not just about individual traits either. It's about the collective character of the team or the organization.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Because you need to have that environment where people feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throw out ideas.
Ecological safety is huge. Yeah.
And to bounce ideas off of each other.
To support each other, to not be afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly.
Because that's where the learning happens, right?
Yes.
So then we move on to chapter 8, which gets into improvisational decision making.
Okay.
And they really focus on leadership teams in this chapter.
Because that's where the pressure's really on, right?
Absolutely. When you're making decisions in the moment,
Yes.
high stakes, you don't have time to, do all the analysis.
Right. You got to go with your gut sometimes.
You got to trust your gut.
Yes.
But it's not just blindly trusting your gut.
Yeah.
It's about having a shared understanding of the situation.
So still having that communication.
Communicate.
Even in the midst of the chaos.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's where, having clear communication channels,
Yeah.
shared mental models, that all comes into play.
So it's like you're on the same page as a team,
Yes.
even though you're making it up as you go along.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so they set us up with all the theory, all the concept.
Yeah, the framework.
And then in part 4, they really bring it to life with all these different case studies.
Yeah, they show it in action.
Which I always appreciate because it's like, how does this actually work?
Right, because you can talk about it all day, but
Yeah.
how does it actually happen?
Exactly.
So one that I found really fascinating was in chapter 10,
Okay.
they look at a high-tech firm.
Okay, so we're talking fast-paced environment.
Very fast-paced, constantly changing.
Yeah.
And they were looking at how they use improvisation in their strategic planning process.
Interesting. So they're not just saying, okay, we're just going to wing it, no plan at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Because you still need some sort of direction.
Right. You need a roadmap.
Yeah, you need a roadmap. But it's more about acknowledging that in that kind of environment, that roadmap needs to be flexible.
You have to be able to adapt.
You got to be able to adapt.
So it's like having guideposts versus a rigid map.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that.
Okay. So they use a framework called the 12 P's of practice.
The 12 P's. Okay, I'm going to have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay.
But essentially, it helps them to stay agile and adaptable while still working towards their overall strategic goals.
I love that. What other case studies stood out to you?
Well, in Chapter 16, they took us into the world of Special Forces teams.
Okay, so now we're talking.
Now we're talking.
High stakes, high pressure.
High stakes. They have to improvise constantly under immense pressure.
I can't even imagine.
I know.
I would just
Freeze.
yeah, just what do I do?
It's like deer in the headlights.
And they're expected to perform
Exactly.
under those conditions.
So the book emphasizes the role of leadership
Okay.
in managing momentum in those situations.
So the leader becomes like a
Facilitate.
facilitator.
Okay.
To make sure that the team is empowered to improvise,
Right.
but also staying focused on the mission.
Okay, so there's that balance.
It's a delicate balance, right?
Yes.
Because you want to give them the freedom to adapt.
Right.
But you also need to make sure that they're not going too far off track.
Yes, and that they're still aligned with what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's like you said, knowing when to step back as a leader, let the team take the lead,
And when to step in.
and when to step in and be more direct.
Yeah, exactly.
I love how they go from one extreme to another,
To range.
from a tech startup
Yeah, right.
to a special forces team,
Totally different context.
but these principles still apply.
They still apply.
It really highlights that universality
Absolutely.
of organizational improvisation.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
So if our listeners could take away just one thing from this deep dive on organizational improvisation,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Embrace improvisation.
Okay.
Don't be afraid of the uncertainty. Because like we were talking about with serendipity, that's where those breakthroughs happen.
Yes.
When you're able to be comfortable with that unknown.
It's like, don't shy away from those moments
Yeah.
where things get a little messy.
Yeah, lean into the mess
Yeah.
because that's where the good stuff is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this incredible deep dive
Yeah, my pleasure.
into the world of organizational improvisation.
It's been fun.
Listeners, we hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and keep improvising.
Keep improvising, yes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep revising and resubmitting.